So as you can see, the syllabus has now been uploaded on the website. Okay, so you can see the syllabus on the website. Share it. Okay, so this is the syllabus. Okay, introduction to the forensics, digital evidence collection, investigation, cybersecurity laws in our country, then the open source tools. Now, it may not be like it's not necessary that you install the same tools or whatever. So we'll have some assignment because the subject as such does not have any practical or tutorial component. So basically, I'll give you some assignments for the internal marks or teachers evaluation, teacher assessment, and those assignments will be either case studies, so some tools that you can easily install on your machine and you can try those tools. So we'll see what we can do, and then security software and case studies. And these are the books. Of course, the syllabus is available and you can see it online on the VGTI website. Can you see the address mark? It is there on the website. If you see. R5 scheme, there is a new link added. So, okay, so let's start with just an introduction of the subject. While this loads, so digital forensics. Okay, so what do you mean by the word forensics? As a basic knowledge of English, or you might have encountered this word anywhere in your reading or anywhere before. Investigate is one part of it. Anyone else? Evidence collection, yes. So investigating, analyzing, and producing evidence. So basically, yes, you are on the right track, everybody. So What do you mean by forensics? Okay, so forensics is the use of whatever the science and technology that we have to investigate and establish the facts, which we can also call as evidence. Okay, so I can say it is the use of science and technology to investigate and establish facts. Okay, can also called as evidence in court of law. So that evidence that we collect, okay, we identify the evidence, we collect evidence, and that has to be preserved and presented in such a way that it is acceptable in a court of law. Okay, so only in case of digital forensics. Now digital forensics can be of multiple types. Okay, so either it is on your local computer, so it is either it is memory forensics or it is network forensics. Okay, what else can you think of? So there are multiple, of course, which we'll study in detail. There can be smartphone, okay, phone, mobile phone forensics. Okay, forensics can be done on that as well. So we'll study these types of forensics later. So, but what are the crimes basically? So why would we require to collect the evidence, and what kind of crimes are, uh, what kinds of crimes require digital forensic? So one of the examples, common examples is corporate espionage. So what do you mean by espionage? Anyone understand the nature of? Yes, spying, correct. Stealing competition data. So whatever the data, it might be confidential data, okay, tenders or whatever, espionage. And there can be other kinds of, like, for example, illicit images or blackmailing kind of a thing. Then there can be, in a broad sense, we can say anything that causes violations of the corporate policy. So every company has a policy to protect their data, to protect their financial and protect their interests. So violation of that corporate policy, we can say it's a crime, and that requires digital forensics. Then another common thing is hacking attempts. Hacking attempts. Now again, there are three types of hackings. You must have heard of these. So one is the white hat. So white hat hackers are like consultants appointed by the company to analyze their, any security, whether there are any security holes, okay, and fix them. Those are the white hats. Then there are black hat hackers, also called as crackers, and they basically do the same thing. They also identify the flaws and the security holes, but they are not, associated with the company as such, or other I can say not associate or not inclined towards the benefit of the company. They want to exploit those security plot holes and security holes and whatever the faults that are there to exploit the company and make profits. Then there are some gray hat coders or gray hat hackers basically. So gray hat hackers, you can say that they work as, you know, they can disguise as white hat hackers, okay, and secretly sell that information to black hat hackers for some money, in return of some money, you know, in return of some profit, their profit. Okay, so those are the gray hat hackers. Now this is not a crime. Okay, this is not a crime as such. They are appointed by the company. But if a white hat hacker has, becomes a gray hat hacker and leaks that information to the black hat hacker, the bad guy, so then it becomes a crime which has to be investigated by the digital forensic techniques. So whenever an incident takes place, we want to know what happened. Okay, so computer forensics is applied, and the data that you get from computer forensics should be such that it is technically sound, no, it is legally sound, and it is analytically sound. Okay, so basically, you should be aware of the computer technology. Okay, how the basic underlying working of the computer, that is, how the data is stored magnetically, okay, or how like the digital electronics part, okay, the flip flops. How does the computer work at the electronics level, the basic level, ones and zeros. Okay, so another thing is it should be sound legally, in the sense that, as we'll see in a module that later, that each country has its own cyber laws. Okay, so it should fit. It should be applied according to the cyber laws. Okay, and analytically sound means, so there are some techniques by which we can establish the, you know we can enhance the strength of the evidence. There are some techniques by which we can, uh, what we can say is, we can put forth a strong argument for our evidence. Like no one can refute that evidence just like that. We have some background, some supporting uh, analysis done to strengthen that evidence, basically. Okay, so next part. Okay. So how we can do that? Okay. Like, how can we ensure that whatever the evidence and whatever evidence we are collecting and we want to present, and whatever the forensics that we are doing, we want to do it in a good way in the sense that it will be acceptable and our efforts will not go in waste. So efforts will not be in vain. So what are the elements of a good process? Okay, and the elements of good forensic process. So first is the cross validation. Okay, so cross validation means whenever possible we should use more than one tool. Like if you recover the data, okay, let's say a simple example. If you recover the data from a hard disk using a particular tool, which is called, can say, which is memory forensics. Okay, so there are tools like RAM capture and all. So you capture the data using one tool. To back up that data, you use another tool, and you can validate, you can cross validate the results of the first tool, right? So that is cross validation. And another aspect of cross validation is, like, put yourself in the shoes of a forensic investigator. Okay, so you have used your techniques to collect the evidence, and you have used your tools and you have collected the evidence. So normally you work as a team, basically. Okay? So there is some another investigator, and when you are presenting it in a court of law, okay, so it becomes even more solid when you say that I have established these evidences, and there is another investigator who has used his or her techniques of whatever tools and techniques that he or she has used, and they have also arrived at the, or you know these are their results. Okay, so cross validation not only by a single person using different tools, but it can also be that a particular investigator can go to another investigator and say that you also perform the investigation on this particular, whatever the piece of evidence that is there, and let's cross validate our results and present it then. So it becomes even more solid. Okay, second technique or second element is proper proper handling of evidence. Proper handling of evidence means your techniques should not harm the, okay, whatever techniques you are using to gather information from the piece of hardware or software or whatever it is. Your technique should not disturb, or it should not harm the piece of hardware or software that you are working on. Okay, so there is something called as an observer effect. Observer effect. So sometimes the mere viewing of data on a system without using proper forensic techniques can cause the data in the system to change. Okay, so while presenting the evidence in the court, you should be able to prove, or you should be able to establish that that evidence is exactly the same as the evidence that existed when it was collected. Okay? Do you get this sentence, what I'm trying to say? So a crime happened somewhere. Initially a team went there to collect the evidence, right? And then after some days or after some time, that evidence is presented in a court. So you should be able to prove that that evidence which was collected at that particular scene of crime, whatever, that evidence is intact. Okay, it has been handled properly, it is intact, and it is exactly the same, in the same condition. It is now being presented in the court of law. Okay, it is exactly same condition as it was at the scene of crime. Okay, then there is something called as chain of custody. chain of custody. Okay, what do you mean by the chain of custody? So basically, let's say, you know, whatever, like a crime is reported by someone working in the organization, and let's say all the computers in that organization are sealed for a while. Okay? While the investigation is taking place to collect the evidence, it is sealed. Okay, so it is important to show that, and so the investigator must be able to show that who had access to the evidence. So between the time that the crime was reported and the investigators arrived at the scene, the investigator must know and then must be able to present it to the court, obviously, that who had access to the evidence, what they did with the evidence, okay, like whether any tampering was attempted within that time frame. Okay, so that is called as chain of custody, custody of the evidence, basically, chain of custody of the evidence. So some employee was working on that computer, let's say. Did that employee perform anything, try to manipulate the piece of hardware or software? Did the employee attempt any tampering? If not, then whoever was the uh, person in charge of collecting the evidence, did that person attempt any tampering? Okay, so chain of custody. So some first the employee was in custody of the evidence, then there was someone who collected the evidence, custody shifted to that person, then it shifted from that person to, as I said before, in cross validation, there can be multiple investigators who will work on that evidence to try to establish the or try to extract the information and work on it basically. So multiple investigators will work on the same piece of evidence. So what was the chain of custody of the evidence? How many hands has it passed through? And what is the proof that it has not been you know tampered by any one of them? So how do we know that? Okay, so there are some cryptographic. So obviously, like in real life that we have right now, in more secure applications, there are more secure techniques. But the basic techniques that you must have heard of. So let me know whether you have heard of these techniques. There are some cryptographic hash functions known as MD5 and SHA-1, SHA-1, and then there are variants of SHA depending on the size of the hash. So have you heard of these cryptographic hash functions, MD5 and SHA? The most common instance that you must have seen is no, which is not related to forensics, is that whenever the software is made available for downloads, a checksum is given with it. It is normally a MD5 or SHA created using those hash functions, and using that it can be verified whether your download is secure or not, whether it has been manipulated, whether it is safe or not, or whether there is any error. Okay, so that is one way to ensure that no tampering has been done. So the equivalent of the, what you can say, non-digital or the crime that takes place. So the equivalent of this non-tampering is, it's like finding fingerprints, basically. Okay, so these algorithms act like fingerprints, and you can mathematically establish. Okay, you can mathematically establish that the evidence is the same on the day of uh, being presented to the court as it was on the day when the investigator collected it. Okay, so mathematically it can be verified. Okay, and then also apart from that, so there should be proper management and there should be a proper record maintained as to who had accessed the evidence and what for how long did they access it and what they did exactly on it. Okay, so this will so why is it necessary? Because the opposing lawyer, okay, will make such claims during the hearing, okay, during the case, that it has been tampered. So then you can present this evidence, okay, the records and the mathematical and the proofs that it's not tampered. Next thing is completeness of investigation. Completeness. So what do you mean by completeness? Sorry. What do you mean by completeness? Is that so? Realize there are three parties. Now you are not the lawyers, basically. Okay, try to visualize the scenario. What I'm trying to say. Okay? There is an organization. So whoever the CEO, CTO, CFO, whatever the organization has its own officials. There is some organization. Okay, organization has the affiliation with a legal firm. Okay, corporate lawyers are there. So the whenever the crime is committed and someone notices the crime during the audit or whatever, so organization internally recognizes that something is wrong. Okay, a crime has happened, something is wrong. They will contact the lawyers, the law firm which with whom the corporate has a tie-up, whatever, and the law firm will have a tie-up with the digital forensic investigators. Basically, this is the common scenario I'm saying. Now, the company can also, call the investigators directly, whatever. But see this scenario, what I'm trying to say. Okay, assume this scenario. So now the investigators have collected some evidence. They gave that evidence to the lawyers. The lawyers prepared, what they're going to say. The lawyers are prepared for the hearing. Okay, and let's say there is a week for the hearing, and exactly 1 or 2 days before the hearing, the investigators come up and say, "Look, I have found some new evidence." Okay, then it becomes difficult for the lawyers to incorporate those evidences into whatever the preparation they had, whatever the case they are building. Okay, so that 11th hour evidence that is there, it should be avoided as much as possible. In the sense, and how it can be avoided is by ensuring that your investigation is complete and thorough. Okay, beforehand. So lawyers find it difficult when the evidence is presented at the 11th hour, and you know seeing that the client, so who is the client? Basically the client is the organization at where the crime has taken place. Okay, so the client also is in a spot, like if a new evidence is found, okay, because the client has to speak at the hearing or whatever. So 11th hour preparations are bad. Okay? So it should be done beforehand. So we should now a completeness again. So it should again happen within the organization's policy. Okay, so this is real life that we are talking of. Okay, So you don't go against the organization and covertly collect some evidence from somewhere. That again becomes a problem. But it should be complete within whatever you are allowed to explore. You should explore it completely. You should investigate it completely initially itself. Then fourth is management of management of archives. Okay, management of archives. So basically, again, in legal world, whatever the cases that take place, they are recorded for study. Basically, you know. So while studying for a case, preparing for a case, the lawyers normally go back to an archive of the previous cases, which are which are used as a reference. That in a similar case, what ruling was given by particular bench of the judges, or what was the case and what had the court said. Yeah, and that is used as an argument. So similarly, in this case, management of archives means that uh, once this particular case is over, let's say, whatever the evidence is presented and the ruling is out, okay, either you win the case or lose the case, whatever, you don't get rid of the evidence, or you don't get rid of whatever the not the evidence, the information that you had gathered from the evidence. So how well you can manage that information, that is also a sign of a good forensic process. Okay, we should be able to manage that information in a good way. And why is it necessary? Because the the client may come up to the lawyer, and that case, that information may be required, let's say 6 months after the date, or a year after the date, or whatever, because let's say they want to appeal in some other court. Okay, in that case you should be able to fulfill that request fairly soon, like, you know if not instantly, because that information is available at your disposal. Okay, you should not, what you can say, you should not require to start at square one. Okay? Again, we have to you know, s- go through the evidence and collect the information. That should not be the case. So next thing is, so that information must not get lost. That was my point, and information should be easily retrievable. Okay? Then the next point is technical competency. Okay, so the investigator, as an investigator, you must have the complete technical understanding of the computers, and as I said, from the lowermost level of the working of a computer. Okay, so when you are using a tool, when you are using a tool to capture the data from the RAM, or capture the data from a hard disk, or you are using network capture tools. Okay, so I think now those of you who have done BCA or BSc IT, you must have. Okay, now I'm reading the chat right now. Detection of certain things, writing the report. Yes. Yes, writing a report is also an important part. We'll see. We'll see that it's a part of the process. Creating log files, confidentiality, evidence is under our control. Who can access the evidence? Then, so the Wayback Machine can be an example of archives. Yes, Wayback Machine has the data of websites. It's like a search engine. So, like the spider, if you must have heard of the spider component of a search engine, visits the web pages and creates the page rank. Page rank was the older algorithm. Now there are newer algorithms to assign the things. But similarly, they create the images and store it in the Wayback Machine. We are not talking of those archives. Okay? Yes, those are an example of an archives. There is uh, okay. So I hope that point is clear. Okay. So what I was asking is, so you must have studied the tools like, yeah, have you used Wireshark? Yes, Wireshark you must have commonly used. So you can analyze the traffic. You can click on a particular packet. You can analyze the contents of the packet. Okay. Then there is a tool called as Nmap. Nmap have you used? Nmap. Some of you have used that. Okay. So these are the examples of tools that you have used, and these tools are also used in network forensics. Okay. So now some of the tools which you may or may not have heard of or used, they are RAM capture and okay. So we'll see examples of other tools, and there are toolkits and tools available. So don't blindly rely on the tool. That is what is meant by technical competency, is that you should be in a position to, you should play the devil's advocate. Basically, you should be able to challenge the tool, challenge your tool's assumptions. How does your tool actually work? How does the tool, you know, actually, how accurate is the tool? How reliable is the tool? And for that, you will have to know. So these are all open source tools, most of them. Okay. So whatever tools we'll study and will, if possible, work on should be open source tools, so that you should be able to see how they are coded, how they exactly do what they do. Okay. So you yourself as an investigator should challenge your tool, okay, tool assumptions. Do not blindly settle on a tool. Okay. So as I said, there is Nmap, there is Wireshark, then there is a network miner as well. Okay. NS2 network. So whatever the multiple tools that you have, which tool, when you challenge the tool, only then you will be able to, when you know the working of the tool, when you challenge the results of the tool yourself, then you can be easily defend it to anyone else. Okay. So while we'll take some case studies and you will perform certain things as an assignment, an important part of that will be, if not reading through the entire open source code. Okay, if you do that, that's well and good. But if not that, at least go to the white paper, okay, of whoever created the tool. Should be very well aware of the limitations of the tool first. Okay, and then accordingly you can use another tool to overcome those limitations or whatever. So that is meant by technical competency. Okay. So for example, digital signatures. Okay. Now, now let me tell me, are the hash functions that we use, are the results of the hash function, which we commonly called as just the hash. Okay, so is the hash unique to each file or each data set that we have? Is the hash always unique? Yes or no? Okay. Now mostly it is yes. Mostly it is yes. Now, have you heard of the birthday attack? Okay. So okay, so the birthday attack is based on the fact that by the name, the birthday attack came from the fact that, okay, so it's a question of probability actually. So there are certain people in a room. Let's say there is a birthday party going on. Okay, there is a certain collection, there is crowd in a room, and how many people must be there in a room? The least number. Okay, how many people must be there in the room to ensure that there is at least 50% chance that two people share birthday on the same day of the year. Not that day, but what I'm trying to say is, you get my point? Like, for example, today is 24th May. Okay, so I'm not fixing that day as it's a 24th May, but I'm saying that what is the chance that, or what is the number of people required in a room such that there is at least 50% chance that there will be a pair of people in the room which will have the same of day of birth. Now I'm not counting the year, okay, just the day, month and day of the month. Okay, so the answer comes out as, okay, you can go and search for it. The answer comes out as 23. Okay, so if there are 23 people in a room, there is a 50% chance that there will be two people in the room who will have the same day, same birthday. Okay, same birthday. They will share their birthday. Okay, so birthday attack means that what happens in the birthday attack is, if you continually change the input data sets, the resulting hash will be the same. It will not be the same, like as frequently, but it's not like a universal fact that the hash will never get repeated. Okay, do you get the point? Okay, so if you say, if you if you say that, or not, like, if the opposing lawyer says that, but what is the proof, or what is the probability? So okay, in many techniques in computer science or whatever, like, I used to teach big data in the previous semester. So some of the techniques do not give you the exact results. Okay, the results are all, many a times the results are approximate because you cannot process that much amount of data or whatever. In those cases, so in certain techniques, you must be aware of the probability of error, and then you can say that when let's say the opposite party says that, but what is the proof that you know the hash can be the same, or not not so simple as an argument, but you should be able to demonstrate that the probability of that is very low, and that should be able to established mathematically that when you use a particular hash function, the probability of having a collision. Now the terminology is collision in case of hash functions. If you say when two keys produce the same hash value, then we call it as a collision. So the probability of a collision is so low, so less that it is negligible or whatever. So for that you must have technical competence to demonstrate that, you know, proof of uh, soundness of the technique that you're using. You should be able to prove that. Okay. Next thing is how to put it in. mm, So while performing uh, an investigation, sometimes the hardware malfunctions. Okay. Sometimes the software crashes. Okay. So the investigation must be conducted in such a manner that you should be able to retrace all your steps. Okay. So you can say that definition, clear definition and justification. Clear definition and justification of the process must be there. Okay. It's like the have you heard of atomic transactions in case of a database? Atomic transactions, they can't be stopped. Yes, it is correct. So atomicity, then there is consistency. Okay, acid protocol that is there. So the transaction, in the sense that what I'm trying to say is, if you abort a particular process, whatever the investigation you are conducting, if the hardware malfunctions or if the software crashes while performing the investigation, you should be able to uh, prove that if the if the process that you have, now that process may be a tool or whatever set of tools that you have, if it fails in between, you should be able to ensure that it will not give any partial results as such. Okay, either it will happen in full, okay, or the consistent state that was there of the evidence, you will be able to go back to that particular state. It will not give wrong results or partial results because of failures in between. Okay, so clear definition of the process, you should be able to clearly tell the steps that you were following and where the things went wrong, and then how you perform the steps again in a good way and got the correct results. Okay, so clear definition and justification. Justification means you should be able to justify whatever the tools or whatever the succession of tools that you used for the investigation. You should be able to justify your choices, and whom you will justify it to, you will justify it to the judge basically. So you should be so clear in establishing the atomicity and You should be able to justify the tools that you used in the process. Then there is legal compliance. As I said before, you should follow the laws. You know, the investigation must be performed. So just as I said before, the investigation must be complete. Okay? Completeness is important, but for the sake of completeness, violate the you should not violate the policies of the organization or law of the land, basically. Okay, so legal compliance of the techniques must be there. You should so you arrive at a great piece of information, but the evidence has not been obtained legally. If the evidence has not been obtained legally, then it is not admissible, and in fact it can get you in trouble. Okay, so then there is flexibility. Flexibility means that the process should not be rigid, basically. Now this is very theoretical thing, right? The process should not be rigid as such. What I mean is, if you should not be prejudiced that I will use this set of four tools. I have been using them always, and these are the reliable tools. But if someone else suggests or you require to use another tool, then you should be able to incorporate that incorporate that tool in your process. The process should be such that the process must be flexible so that any new tool can be added, or okay, if the condition is such that one of the tool or one of the steps of the process that you have, it cannot be used, still you should be able to ensure that the process still works. So there should be a flexibility. Now this is done while ensuring the atomicity that I mentioned earlier. Okay, the results should still be correct, and you know it there should be consistency of the results even after additional removal of tools. Okay, so what is the process now? What is the process that we'll see in the next lecture? Okay, what are the steps in a process that we'll see in the next lecture? Any questions? Anyone wants to say or ask anything? So this was just an introduction to the digital forensics. I can see 41 students are there, approximately 41 students are there. So have you filled a form? Have you opted for it? What process did you follow? Will you be giving notes for the subject? Most probably, yes. Yes, but notes will be like at the most they will be like PPTs. Okay, but you will have to do some reading on your own, and whatever is discussed in class should be also in your. You should also keep that in mind. No form, we just got classroom course. Yes. Okay. So normally you have to fill a choice form, like which elective are you going to choose. Okay, and then you must have registered in the previous semester. Okay, so no problem. Like this time there was no separate time for collecting the responses and everything. I just wanted to make sure that are you all of you interested in this subject, or what. So any question, anything you want to ask, any suggestions, anything? Okay. Okay. If okay. If you're interested, I can see. So if there are no questions, then we can stop the lecture here.